What if the widely accepted notion that the world's population is exploding out of control turned out to be wrong?
Never before in human history have birth and fertility rates fallen so low, so far, so fast, so long, in so many places.
Never before?
Never.
What do a scholar, a demographer, a cartoonist, a Chinese calligrapher, a mathematician, a songwriter, 2 young filmmakers, 53 goldfish, and 6 babies have in common? Tonight, they all come together to explore the birth dearth. What if the human race is shrinking? Getting you folks into the tent every evening as Mickey's hand moves closer to the midnight hour depends in some measure on arresting your attention, which is why on tough nights the good Lord gave us Robert Krulwich. Krulwich is something of a latter-day alchemist, turning potentially leaden subjects into gold. I know we are all prepared to concede that the issue of global population growth is an important subject, but most of us, having conceded the point, would then prefer to move on to something frothier, like, say, Newt Gingrich's presidential ambitions. All right, here's a promise. Krulwich is going to make you laugh, at least twice, maybe more. He will also make you think, but not too much. And here's a guarantee to go with the promise. He's going to do it in a manner that has never even been attempted on network television before. And he'll do it without a safety net. I have no further inducements to offer. Well, maybe one. The good folk at Zero Population Growth are not going to like this program because the theme of Mr. Krulwich's sermon tonight raises serious questions about some of their gloomiest predictions. Robert, you're on your own.
We've all heard this over and over. In fact, Thomas Malthus, the British economist, said it 200 years ago. Human beings, being only human, will multiply and then multiply. And it's true, if you look at the data, that's what's been happening. After a slow 10,000-year start, in the last 500 years, the world's population has soared. And if we keep going at this rate, the Earth will eventually get so crowded, in the end, we human beings will crowd ourselves to death because we are having too many children.
That's baloney.
Scholar Ben Wattenberg says all this is wrong. Too many children is not the problem.
You go around college campuses and people say, we're having too many children, we're having too many children, God, the world's going to be polluted, and they're taking away this, and there's not going to be enough resources. That's baloney.
Because look what's been happening, he says. If you go back to 1955, the average mother on Earth, the reproducing female, had 5 babies. 5, that was the average. By 1975, just 20 years later, the average had dropped to 4 babies per mother. And by 1995, the worldwide average was down to 3 babies per mother. And today, we're just a shade under 3 children per mother.
So while we have been obsessing about a population explosion, Ben says really what's happening is birth rates have been dropping farther and faster and in more places than ever before, and this is happening irrespective of religion,
in Italy, for example, a Catholic country where contraception is a sin, the average mom has 1.2 babies. That's all. But check the Muslim countries. In Tunisia, rates have fallen there from 7.2 babies in the early 60s to 3.3 today. In Malaysia, the birth rate's down by half. Turkey, way down. In Confucian cultures in Asia, in Thailand, from 5.9 to 1.8 babies. Same in Taiwan. Same in Japan. And while on average the richest countries do have the fewest babies, if you look at the poor countries, the ones usually described as swarming.
It's swarming, swarthy, sweaty. I think it sort of likes that SW formation. I don't know. And you look at some of those rates, they are astonishing.
Brazil, down. Sri Lanka, down. India, down.
But most interesting, there are now 59 nations where the birth rate has fallen below the number 2. All these countries are either at or below 2. For demographers, the number 2 is key for reasons that aren't too difficult to understand. But for those of you who need a quick refresher course on statistics, I've asked my friend Josh and my friend Adam, who both recently graduated from college and still understand these things, to explain what is meant by replacement value.
What does it mean? Where does it come from? Can you eat it? In order to answer these questions and others just like them, we're going to use colored eggs to represent our nation's population.
This is an egg carton.
Whoa. And so is this.
No way. These 2 eggs will represent the average single-parent pair.
What we're going to do is place this parental pair in the propagation pod.
Then we'll see what pops up.
Whoa! These 2 parents have produced these 2 offspring. So now, where we had 2 parents, we now have 2 offspring. But let's repeat that 10 more times, 1 for every parental pair.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Boom! There it is. So now we see we have 20 offspring where there were 20 parents. 20 parents, 20 offspring.
These 20 offspring grow up and become parents.
And this cycle would theoretically continue. We would expect to experience perfect replacement rate.
But here is a surprise. If a family or if a nation wants to stay at the same level of population, it's not enough for 2 parents to have just 2 children on average. They have to have 2 and a little bit more for a very simple reason, which Josh and Adam will now illustrate by traveling to the distant past.
Ah! Energizing! Back then, couples knew that many of their children weren't going to live long enough to reproduce.
Because there were many ways to die.
Put a saddle on this one, huh?
With such high mortality rates, it was not uncommon that 1 in 20 children was not going to make it.
19 kids, 20 parents. Someone's not getting replaced.
Knowing this, people back then had extra children to satisfy fate's evil requirement.
Oh,
And this extra baby stops the population from dwindling and dwindling, as you see here, to nothing.
Okay, now you just saw, Josh and Adam, you're Carl Haub, you're a demographer, a real demographer from the Population Reference Bureau in Washington. Are those kids right about this 2 and a bit?
Absolutely.
Let me ask you to demonstrate this by taking a look at the nation of Italy. Now, we've represented Italy, of course, you recognize the boot, and each of these little rotelli here are little fat Italian people who live in the country. Now, there are 57 million Italians in Italy right today. What is the birth rate there at the moment?
Italian women average only 1.2 children per woman. Very low.
So what does that mean? If they all reproduce at a 1.2 rate, what happens to Italy, which is well below replacement?
It's very simple. The population starts to decline, and then it's cut about in 2.
Huh. And then every 40 years?
About every 40 years, we just start cutting in 2, all the way down. So, get them out of the boot. They're hiding.
Yeah.
Till we get down to the year
Year what? No, turn it around in the right way, yeah.
3117. No more Italians.
So there's nobody there.
There's nobody home.
Actually, a very precise calculation by mathematician Michael Carey of Boston University determined that Italy would be left with its last Italian at exactly 3:36:07 a.m. February the 8th, 3082. Obviously, in real life, this is not going to happen. Either immigrants will move into Italy to take up the slack, or Italians will change their minds and do what they've always done so well.
Angela, tu sei mia. Sei mia, mia.
But as good as they are at this sort of thing, the overall trend is fewer babies per family. Yes, there are more babies today than ever in the history of the world, but if all those babies grow up and decide to have, on average, just 2 kids, or 2 and a bit, then the world will stop growing.
It's just going to level out.
And according to the latest United Nations statistics, that's the direction we're headed, particularly if the most prolific mothers in the world, African women, come down a little bit more. Ben says that'll happen.
If the natural state of humanity in a modern circumstance is below 2.1, and these less developed countries are modernizing, it does not take a genius to posit that the natural fertility rate in a modern circumstance for the total world over a period of time will go below replacement. Now,
does anybody think that that's likely to happen?
Ben does, but indeed there are a number of very prominent demographers who predict that our crowded world, instead of getting more crowded, inevitably and probably in the next 50 or 100 years, the population of the world will start to shrink. Maybe. In Chinese, the word good is formed from 2 characters, says calligrapher Ben Wang.
The character for good, the left-hand side is a woman. So the picture is the body of a woman dancing. And the right-hand side is the picture of a child with his 2 hands stretching out. So in the Chinese person's mind, once you have a wife and you have a son, the important thing is to have a son. Then life is perfect and good.
There is in all of us a profound urge to reproduce, not just sons, daughters too. But what's so odd about Ben Wattenberg's proposition is that he thinks it'll soon be normal all over the world for 2 adults to come together and produce less than 2 offspring.
That seems unnatural.
it's weird. I agree with you. It's weird. And that's why we're doing this program, because something weird has been happening. Something in the modern world and over the last 3 decades or so, 30 years, third of a century, has been weird. We've never seen anything like it. At some point, we ought to say, now, wait a minute, you know, maybe that's the way people behave.
Couples in the modern world, Wattenberg argues, are choosing to have fewer children for reasons that are profound and won't go away.
Let's talk about what caused this and see if it's going to uncause it.
First of all, there is sex. Men and women all over the world now know how to have sex without necessarily having to have a baby. That information, now that it's widely available, is not likely to disappear. Then there is need. Farm families can use children. An extra hand in the field helps. In the city, each child is an extra mouth to feed. They're not needed. But most of all, there is the question of affordability. If you already have 2 kids, the third and the fourth can be expensive. Take from the 2 you have. And as important, now that mothers can imagine doing something in their lives other than having babies, like having a paying job, the extra child costs them too. And Ben Wattenberg says all of these changes are almost certain to continue.
If you think women are going to go back to being uneducated, not finish high school, not go to college, I'm sure that would raise fertility. Not going to happen. If you think women aren't going to stay in the workforce and not want to pursue a career, that might raise fertility. Not going to happen. They're all headed or have been headed in the other direction.
What about the possibility that love of children will reassert itself with some special power?
It's possible, I hope.
Elle dort un peu, ma pauvre poupée, bien enveloppée dans son beau lit bleu.
After all, can you look at these portraits by photographer Howard Schatz and not think, maybe we should have another baby? If slightly larger families do become the fashion, then Ben's predictions will be wrong.
Sure. But
how do you know then that a little change in fashion won't ruin this whole theory?
I don't know anything. Look, If you're asking, can things change? Of course things can change. Otherwise, I'd be saying here, not I think, but I know. I don't know. But I'm saying that the evidence leans heavily in that direction.
And the best argument that Ben has is pragmatic. Unlike some primitive creatures, we can think ahead and plan. We know that if we multiply in the next century at the rate that we've multiplied in the last century, the population of our world will grow to 200 billion people. Very, very crowded. So if we have any survival instinct at all, the human birth rate will change, says demographer Carl Haub.
It will come down. I mean, it must come down, and it will, certainly.
Okay, let's concede the point. Let's say that in the next half century, instead of a population explosion, the Earth begins to have a population decline. If that happens, what will it be like in the year, 2080, when this little guy becomes a great-grandparent? What will the world be like?
I think we should start shooting. Are we shooting? Okay.
If the world is going to get smaller, there will still be lots of babies on Earth. Lots and lots of babies. So if this little guy were born, say, 100 years from now, and if he were awake to listen, he would, because of lower birth rates, probably have fewer brothers and fewer sisters, fewer cousins, and by the logic of generations, fewer aunts, fewer uncles. It's the family constellation. That is what is going to shrink. And because of all the new ways of making babies, the family itself will probably be different. So
think about it. If with new technology, anybody, gay, straight, young, old, ancient, with cloning, you could be dead and have kids. If one day anybody can have a baby any time, and you add to that we could extend our lives, say, another 50 years or more, well, then everything we know and remember from our own lives, from our old home movies, it all could change. And to singer-songwriter Loudon Wainwright III, what's coming may be a little disturbing.
The millennium is almost here. The year 2000 looms. A brand new, braver world awaits us, with less cradles, fewer tombs, fewer cousins, aunts, and uncles, more endangered family zones. The only child will not be lonely, though. He'll have play dates with his clones. And the old live on forever, stored and housed in nursing homes. We visit at times, recite nursery rhymes, then we leave them there alone. No one wants to die, they don't have to. Life's a never-ending dream. If you've got the right insurance for magic potions and machines. Just think of a Thanksgiving in 2041. Will those seated round the table be related to someone? If there's a turkey carcass wishbone, who gets to make the wish? The surrogate adopted grandchild conceived in a petri dish. We got a big old birthday coming up. There'll be a christening and a wake. Ice cream melts as do the ice caps. Candles drip wax onto cake. The millennium is almost here. The year 2000 looms. A brand new, braver world awaits us, with less cradles, fewer tombs. Lots less cradles, fewer tombs. Yes, less cradles, fewer tombs.
Doesn't sound so nice, does it? But wait a second. If families get smaller and are conceived differently, why is that so terrible? Remember, all we're saying here is when the population of the world shrinks, that means instead of a family of 5 kids, we'd be down to some average family of 2. Is 2 such a lonely number? Small families mean more attention from mommy, more attention, period. Big families mean more companions, more allies. So which is better?
There will be 132 million new babies born this year on Earth, all of them wonderful. The question is, if one day we do have fewer babies, will there be less joy in the world or more? I'm Robert Krulwich for Nightline.